Now you're having machlekes with
famous
Yoel
one.
Kalbo.
No, I said,
Beautiful,
but he's
beautiful
usually a
song.
very down-to-earth translator. I'm surprised he took this. He picked
This
this
is
word.
from the early days.
Running around? You remember going?
Okay, so we're live. First of all, welcome everybody back from the Hanukkah vacation. We did have a share last week, even though it was only made public now. But so it is on the channel. You can see it. We finished.
You weren't here though.
I was here, and other people were here, but most of the people weren't here.
We know about.
No, everybody was here.
Everybody was
Except
here.
me.
Beruach.
Beruach, in
Hello,
spirit.
hello, everybody.
You don't have to make announcements.
Okay, so welcome back. We completed the Maimer View Chayesara, which was a Maimer all about Simcha, and we'll continue on the theme of Simcha this week in Mirz Hashem with the next Maimer, Margla Bepuma Derava, which is a Maimer all about Simcha. Before we start, I'd like to say that this year, like all of the shiurim, are in merit of my mother, Masha Bas Reb Chaim Rafal Yitzchak Lila Nishmas her, whose third yahrzeit is this Shabbos, Zayin Tevis. She passed away 3 years ago on Shabbos, Zayin Tevis. And the shiurim that I give over here, that the Eibster was mezakemi with the help of Maishi, is Lila Nishmas, her soul. And I just want to share a few memories, thoughts about my mother. First of all, my mother was full of a positive energy, full of life, a vivacious energy. And it's very apropos that I'm mentioning this, that it's in merit of her name. Once a year we'll mention it. We don't have to mention it every year, but once a year before the yahrzeit, that I'm mentioning it when we're starting to learn such a fundamental maimer in regards to simcha, to be in good spirits. And that was my mother. My mother was a very sympathetic person. Her heart, she had a tremendous heart. Constantly, every time we heard about somebody who wasn't doing well, even if my mother couldn't do anything about it, the amount of pain that I would see on her face, and the amount of pain that she would talk about whatever was going on was palpable. Her ability to feel other people's feelings. By Shiva, there were two stories that I'll mention here that people mentioned. One person wrote to us that she came to the store and she came to the register. You know, she chose her clothing. My mother had a clothing store on Kingston Avenue, Young Timers. Most people know it as Masha's. And she came to the register with the clothing that she selected. And when my mother swiped her card was declined. Without skipping a beat, my mother told this person, "Oh, my credit card machine is broken. Take the clothes. You come back. Well, when my machine is working, you'll come back. You'll pay me for it." This person knew exactly what was going on. She knew that she was very tight with her credit limit. And, what if she played along, so she shouldn't be embarrassed? That's one side. She wrote the story to us. The person who my mother did this for wrote the story to us. And another story is during Shiva, this person that we never saw came. He was a wealthy individual, a wealthy yid from Manhattan. And he told us that we don't know who he is. He was in the store once shopping, and he saw that my mother was giving a lot of clothing to a family who was in the store and couldn't afford it. And he saw that my mother was giving to them for a very discounted price. And he was a smart person. He figured out what's going on. He told my mother, when he came to the register, he told my mother that he'd like to be a partner in these types of things. Wow. And for years, he would, send my mother money. My mother would tell him when she did something like this, and he would participate in the costs. The other thing I want to say about my mother is her emunah in the Rebbe. Her emunah in the Rebbe was tremendous. Anytime that she would hear a word from the Rebbe, something that the Rebbe said, the calmness that would envelope her suddenly, just from hearing what the Rebbe said, was a sight to be seen. She had a simple emunah in what the Rebbe said, without any chachmas. I remember when she woke me up, Gimel Tammuz Tafshin and Dal. It was 1 o'clock in the morning when we found out, and I was sleeping. My mother woke me up. She woke me up with these words. She said, "Shalomke, everything the Rebbe told us is true, but something happened. Go to 770." But her and to her last day, her simple emunah in the Rebbe, and that the Rebbe is Mashiach, without any embarrassment, without any hesitation, was strong. And that's something that I tried to learn from her. And her last words to us, amongst other things, she told us, "Mashiach, man greit sich for Mashiach, and Mashiach is coming." She mentioned it twice. So, in short, may her merit bring bracha to all of us, and may her memory be an inspiration to all of us. Now let's get to the Maimer. So this is a Maimer. It's as you can see, this Maimer means so much to me, and I wanted to share it with other people. That I actually had it printed for my son's bar mitzvah, a shura for my son's bar mitzvah, and everybody's Shnei Zalman Gansberg. Yeah. So everybody's welcome to keep it. It's a. I don't quite know what to call it. You could perhaps call it a watershed Maimer. It changes everything. I remember I once heard the opinion Fabringing in Elul. The opinion was Fabringing in the back of 770 in the month of Elul. And he was talking about how we always have to be besimcha, even when it comes to times of tshuva, we have to be besimcha. And he expressed himself as noch lang far Margla b'puma derava tavshin memvav. Way before this Maimer of Margla b'puma tavshin memvav, the Rebbe was explaining already how we always have to be besimcha. So we could see from Rapinya, who Rapinya is a top authority when it comes to Yonim of Aveda, to many other things as well, but certainly to Aveda, that he considered this Maimer to be a watershed moment. There's before Margla b'puma was something to say that even before this Maimer, the Rebbe was already saying how we always have to be besimcha. So, without further introduction, let's begin the Maimer. Margla, page 15. It says in Gemara, Margla b'puma de Rava. It was commonly heard from Rava, like you mentioned before. It's hard to find. Margla b'puma means that Rava
was in the habit of saying.
He was in the habit of saying you'd like to translate it, but the point is, Regilus. He would regularly say it. This is something.
But when you write, you cannot write it.
You can't write a whole drasha for one word. Yeah. So he would regularly
say this.
But that's what we want.
Yeah, that's in other words, this is something that Rava was very much into. This is something you would hear from him often and frequent. Tachlis chachma tshuva maisim tovim. What's the purpose? What's the point? What do we want with wisdom? What is it that we're looking for with wisdom? So he says the purpose and the ultimate goal of wisdom is tshuva, repentance, umaisim tovim, and good deeds. How does Rava know this? Shenemar, like it says in the pasuk, Reishis chachma yiras Hashem. The beginning of chachma is what? In other words, what's chachma all about? Yiras Hashem, fear of Hashem, which Rava translates as tshuva. Seichel tov, it's good understanding. L'cholei seim, to all those who do it. L'leim dehem le'nemar. It doesn't say that it's good wisdom for those who learn it. It's a very strange pasuk if you think about it. Why does it say seichel tov l'cholei seim? It's a good understanding to those who do it. What does action, what does doing something have to do to understanding? Understanding is something that's own. You told him.
No, I put it in. He must have pressed it.
Okay, amazing.
He got the end, whatever.
Very good. So seichel tov, why does it say that understand l'cholei seim to all those who do it? When you do something, when you perform an action, you get an extra amount of wisdom. What does wisdom have to do to understanding? I should have said l'leim deim. So from this, Rava proves that there's actually a deeper dimension that you would think, and the Rebbe is going to expand on this in the next paragraph. You would think that wisdom is a thing that stands on its own. Says Rava, no. What's wisdom all about? Wisdom is actually all about tshuva, and it's all about ma'asim tov.
He's saying something in Reishis Chachma. I mean, you didn't even come on to Chachma yet. The beginning of Chachma is Yira.
So, but Pashtus over here, he's teaching Reishis Chachma not in time, but in quality, in level.
Okay.
What's the ultimate, the highest type of Chachma is, and what's really the beginning of it? What's the story all about? Not in time, but in Inyan, in understanding and in concept. It's all about Shuvah and Maisim Tov. The Rebbe expands on this. First, the Rebbe explains how Rava got to it. From this, that Rava says, Reishis Chachma, the beginning of Chachma is Yiras Hashem. So from this, we understand that what's the ultimate goal and purpose of Chachma? That's Tshuva, that's Yiras Hashem. And from this, that it says in the pasuk, Shlomo Melech says in the pasuk, Seichel Tevel Chol Eseim, that it's good wisdom, it's good understanding for all those who do it. So we have over here these two concepts. I believe it's Shlomo Melech. It's Tehillim. It's Tehillim. Excuse me, David HaMelech. Thank you. Yes. Yes. That's probably why I made the mistake. But we're good. Now we're good. It's David HaMelech. The Indians and Nemar Beferish because of Seichel Tevel Chol Eseim. And this is spelled out clearly in the pasuk that it's Seichel Tevel Chol Eseim. Those who do it. V'lo yoid. And not only that, it's spelled out clearly in the pasuk. If you only think about it, it's also explained in Teresh Shabbat that this taka is the correct understanding. David Melech was very exact in his choice of words. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a side point. It wasn't for another reason. He was actually making this very point that the purpose and the end goal, what we want, what's the whole story, what is it all about, of seichel, of understanding, is actually good actions. Meisim Tovim, mitzvahs. You do, and it's known, it's known the Maimer of the Fidik Rebbe, that he said on this Maimer Chazal, Mashaperish, Parshas Bei Yishlach Tafresh Bei Tes, the Sefer HaMamorim Kuntreisim, that's where it's printed, and this brackets is a very interesting bracket. Shasham Maschil B'Maimer Chazal Zeh. The Fidik Rebbe begins his Maimer with this Maimer Chazal. U'Meisif Tzin Mekeire, and the Fidik Rebbe notes where it's written. Right, we always have the footnotes on the bottom that tell us where it is, but sometimes you'll have the source in the actual text of the Maimer, in the Pnim. So he writes, "Bebrachas Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, Meseches Brachas, page 17, the first side, Amud Aleph. The Yeshlemer Aremes B'Zeh. The Rebbe learns, and this is a tremendous thing. Ki Yud Zayin he begematria Tov. Yud Zayin is Tov, is good. That this idea, whatever is expressed in this pasuk, which we don't know yet what's expressed in this pasuk, we'll get to it soon. But whatever is expressed in this pasuk is an meaning of goodness, you should know. It's a meaning of tov. And not only that, this is the beginning of goodness. If you want to have goodness, if you want to know what's the main point of goodness, it's this idea that Deb is going to be discussing in this Maimer, Margla b'puma derava. This is goodness itself. So as we learn it, it's what's that? Margla b'puma derava, that Rava would regularly say, would commonly say. This was something he was very into. He had a koch in it. Maybe and the Fidik Rebbe asks a question. The Chachma Hitera, I taka understand how Rava arrived at this idea that the purpose of Chachma, the end goal of Chachma, is wisdom, is tshuva, and Maisim Tovim. However, Chachma's Torah is wisdom, or to translate it better is that, first of all, let's know what Chachma is. Chachma is Torah. We're not talking about general wisdom. The tachlis of which wisdom? The tachlis of the wisdom of Torah. The Indian tachlis Chachma tshuva ma'asim tovim ukapirish Rashi. So what does tachlis Chachma tshuva ma'asim tovim mean? It's as Rashi explains, she'ikara shel Torah she'eima tshuva ma'asim tovim. The main thing of Torah is that it shouldn't only be learning Torah, that you learn it, and then whatever happens the rest of the day has nothing to do with Torah, but rather you should actually do tshuva, and you should actually perform ma'asim tovim. That is the main thing, the main idea of Torah. Umedayik and the Fidik Rebbe has a question on this. So what do you mean the main idea of Torah is tshuva and ma'asim tovim? How does that make any sense? If we think about it for a moment, we'll see it doesn't make any sense. Shrei Torah. What's the mitzvah of Torah? The mitzvah of Torah karahu yediyah v'hasaga b'seichel shuinin achachma. Torah is pshat, that you learn it, that you understand it. If you learn Torah and read it just as a bunch of words and you memorize it, commit it to memory, and that's it, but you don't understand it, you couldn't make sense of it in your own head, you weren't mekayim of the mitzvah of Torah. It's not Torah. You're not Yetzah, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. It's as if you didn't learn when it comes to the point of the mitzvah. Okay, but again, to poil is in Torah Shebichsav, just the words. Is Pirush is different levels. It's always good to speak the words of Torah. But if we're going to talk about the meaning of Torah, the meaning of Torah is that you should understand what you're learning. Therefore, the mitzvah of studying Torah isn't that the Eibishter gave a Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu, where it just has a whole bunch of instructions. It's given to us in a way that we can understand it. We could reason about it. It can make sense to us. So if Torah is the idea of understanding and making sense, so what's the connection of Chachma, of Torah, to understanding and comprehension? Understanding and comprehension is one thing. Tshuva and Ma'asim Tovim is another thing. A person could do tshuva without understanding and comprehending Torah, a person could do Ma'asim Tovim without understanding and comprehending Torah. When you do tshuva and when you perform mitzvahs, l'chura, it doesn't add anything to your understanding of Torah. Maybe you're listening to the instruction of Torah, but the idea of Torah is that you should understand it. It doesn't add anything to your understanding when you actually do it. So the Fidik Rebbe says, good. Rava brought proof to the fact that the primary purpose of Torah, of Chachma, is tshuva and Ma'asim Tovim. But he didn't make it make sense. The pasuk proves it. But how does it work? How does it work? In another Maimer, the Rebbe is medayik that if Rashi said that Torah should have with it tshuva ma'asim tovim, then we wouldn't have a difficulty. But Rashi says ikara shel Torah, the main thing of Torah itself. This is the main thing of Torah. How does that make sense? The main thing of understanding is doing. Does that make any sense? Okay. The Fidik Rebbe continues in the Maimer, sort of as a continuation on the point that you can have tshuva.
So what it means here is that one of the hasoga can have its place without Maisa.
Without Maisa.
It could
Because
be
somebody
it could be that way.
Not only it could be that way, it is that way. In other words, when you do something, so you followed the logic of what it is that you understood, but you didn't add to the logic. Because I did it, now it makes more sense.
Got it. Okay. That's the point. Okay.
That's the point.
Okay.
What is doing
It
it?
doesn't add to the knowledge.
It doesn't add to the knowledge. The
That's
knowledge stands on its own.
Okay.
So the Fidik Rebbe continues in his Maimer, she'inin hatshuva yeshna, etzel kama anoshim pshutim she'inin bali yediyah v'haskala. Tshuva is found by several simple people, simple Yidden, who don't have any knowledge in Torah, they don't have any understanding in Torah, and nevertheless we see that these simple Yidden, with a complete sincerity, they're awakened very much to Tshuva. Ubeichim b'mar nafsham, they cry with a bitter spirit. Their soul feels embittered. Like we see in actuality, that the recitation of Tehillim, when they say the kapitlach of Tehillim, these simple people, they say it with a broken heart, full of feelings of tshuva, even though they have no understanding and no knowledge in Torah. This is a Fidik Rebbe's Maimer, and now look what the Rebbe does. The Rebbe makes a short stop. This meridus is not for our generation. So we'll get back to what the Rebbe says, but I just wanted to point out how it's such a short stop. The shift over here. The magnitude of the change is tremendous. We'll get back to it. First, let's just try to envision and imagine a little bit this thing of B'mar Nafsham. So there's a story of the Chassid of Chanei Handel. There's some Chassidim that the Fidik Rebbe writes about. There's many Chassidim that the Fidik Rebbe writes about. To my understanding, for whatever it's worth, there's some of them that it seems that the Fidik Rebbe writes about them with more of a geschmack. One of them is the Rashbatz. The Fidik Rebbe is always writing in very geschmack language and in very geschmack notes about him. Another one is Reb Chanei Handel. Reb Chanei Handel, he was a very heartzik Yid. So Fidik Rebbe says like this, that it's known that our feelings, how much emotion a person can experience, is dependent on how smart he is. The more a person understands something, if a person understands a situation of happiness, how a challenging situation was turned into a victory, the more of an understanding that he has about how great the challenge was and how complete the victory was, the happier he'll be. The less he can understand, so he'll experience a lesser degree of happiness. The more somebody understands the greatness of his friend, the more he'll feel a love to him. The less he understands. Emotions are controlled by our comprehension, by our perception, which is driven by our comprehension. This is a very fundamental idea in Chassidus, but it's not the time for that now. The Mech Shalt Al Alev. So the Fidik Rebbe says that the rule is that a person will experience emotions commensurate with the amount of understanding that he has. But the Fidik Rebbe writes there's always an exception to the rule. And the Fidik Rebbe describes, I don't remember all the details, but he describes a Shabbos where a respected group of Hasidim were there. It was Yutas Kislev, it was Shabbos. Yutas Kislev was in the middle of the winter in Russia. The Fidik Rebbe says that in the middle of the winter in Russia, it was very short. The Russian winter day ends very early, much earlier than here. And so the Rebbe Rashab would finish davening Shachris at 2:30. Would finish davening Shachris, would go home, make kiddush, but not eat his meal. Make kiddush, probably had a mezainis, a mokim soda. Go back to shul to daven mincha. Then after mincha, he would come back for Suda Shabbos.
Sort of like Shabbos.
Or it was sort of like what we did over here when we were zeichet to have the Rebbe begashmis by Fabrengen. You had to hold on to your place. So you finished Shabbos. You went. I used to go to my uncle's house. He lived on Eastern Parkway, very close to 170. Make kiddush, have a piece of cake, run back to hold your place.
But the Rebbe didn't have any kiddush, any what's it called? He didn't have
Any food.
Yeah.
It was cake or whatever.
But nice.
Anyways, I'll call upon him. So by that Shabbos meal, there was a respected group of Hasidim, and they were discussing the Mittler Rebbe's Hasidim. They were discussing the Mittler Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe's Hasidim, and the Rebbe Rashab spoke at great length about this idea that from understanding comes emotions, and according to the type of understanding, that's how the emotion will be. The Frierdiker Rebbe says he went 11 o'clock at night to shul, and he sees, so the meal continued for a very long time. However, 11 o'clock at night, which was much after the meal concluded, he sees the sausage of Handel, and he's davening Ma'ariv. He didn't yet get to Shemona Esrei, and he's crying bitter tears. Weint bittere Tränen. Finally, after 12 o'clock, he finally finished davening Ma'ariv. And he tells the Frierdiker Rebbe that by the Shabbos table, I wasn't able to understand a thing. I wasn't able to understand a thing what the Rebbe Rashab was talking about. I heard the stories, but I wasn't able to understand a thing. And he was worried. He was bothered because the Rebbe Rashab said that to have feelings, you have to have understanding. And Rebbe Chanech Handel wasn't a big maskil. He didn't understand Chassidus. He probably understood Chassidus pretty well in our days, but he wasn't considered a maskil. He didn't have good comprehension of Chassidus. And here the Frierdiker Rebbe said that to have a Yiddish heart, you have to have a good understanding. And he was crying bitterly. And he said in the Afghains, the Rabbeim, we have to go to the oil of the Rebbe Marash, the Tzemach Tzedek, and be poiled by them, and bring about by them that the Eivishter should give me a Yiddish heart. A Yiddish cup, I don't have the chutzpah to ask for from them. In what merit am I deserving of a Yiddish cup? What did I do? I'm worthless. I did nothing. But a Yiddish heart, every Yid deserves a Yiddish heart. And he's crying and crying and crying. Al Kopanim, the Frierdiker Rebbe then told the story to the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe Rashab said that such a Yiddish heart comes from saying Tehillim with a warmth and with a whole heart, with a tmimis and a varmkeit. So Al Kopanim, over here you see the idea of a Yid crying. The story illustrates a Yid crying bitter tears when he sees that there's something that's not good and it has to be fixed. And this was the Seder for generations. Even by Hasidim, who the Frierdiker Rebbe says didn't have a big haskalah like Chanech Handel, so he was a tnuah of tshuva without any understanding. And this was the way by Yidden for forever, really, you could say. That tshuva was done with a bitterness. And the Rebbe makes over here a statement, like we said earlier, Omnam inyan hamirirus shebetshuva ine shayach b'dereinu zeh ha'achrei. In our last generation, the last generation that exists in a situation of galus, the last generation before Mashiach comes, which is Dara de Ikvisa de Mashiach. It's the generation that's the heel of Mashiach. What does Ikvisa de Mashiach mean? So the little translation is, I believe that you hear the footsteps of Mashiach. However, it's the heel. It's explained in Chassidus that it's the heel of the Jewish body. If you look at the Jewish nation throughout history, going way back to the beginning, and you look at the levels of the Yidden throughout all of those generations, us in this generation are like the heel. We are the lowest part of the body. In other words, we're in a very difficult spot. Our ability to feel close to Hashem and our ability to have stamina and strength in our service of Hashem is very challenged in ways like never before, to the degree that we're the worst off. We're in Ikvisa, we are the heels. And the Rebbe says in this generation, we have no strength for bitterness. You know what the Rebbe says? We have no strength for bitterness in our generation. And not only that, we need an extra measure, or perhaps you could say an extreme measure, of strengthening and encouragement. We're not capable of bitterness. If we have bitterness, it's gonna break us like a toothpick. It's not for us, bitterness. And they've been saying this for all of us. It's a generational thing. And therefore, the Rebbe says, forget about everything you heard before. How does a yid do tshuva? With joy. A yid does tshuva with joy. So too the saying of Tehillim, that Tehillim has to be recited with a broken heart. The Rebbe says no. But over here, I'd like to pause because Lania's deity, to the way I understand what's going on over here, the Rebbe has a very big problem that the Rebbe is going to address now. That's the way I understand it. If it's correct, good. If not, then take it for what it's worth. There's a big problem over here. The idea of Meriris is a fundamental concept in Aveda, in serving the Eibishter. And we could start with a simple muscle. A simple muscle. We could go back to the story of Reb Chanech Handel. Reb Chanech Handel felt that he was in trouble, and his Meriris, his bitterness, brought him to daven Ma'ariv Ba'arichis, and to say he's going to go to the Ohel and to ask the Rabbeim to have Rachmanis on him, to give him a Yiddish Hearts, because he understood from the Rebbe Rashab that he has no shaykhis to Yiddish Hearts. The irony of that. Al kol panim, bitterness, which is painful, can be compared to physical pain when somebody's not feeling good. Yeah. When does somebody call Hatzalah? Somebody calls Hatzalah when he's not feeling good, when he's feeling pain. The pain is, in a way, is the biggest gift to him. If he didn't experience pain, he wouldn't know that his heart is on the verge of having a heart attack. If he didn't experience pain, he wouldn't know that whatever else is wrong with him is wrong. He has an infection or whatever it is that's ailing him, and he would possibly die from it. It's only because of the pain that he realizes something is amiss, there's trouble here, and he either calls Hatzalah, goes to the doctor's office, does whatever it is that he needs to do to heal him. So pain plays a central and pivotal role in the process of improvement, whether it's physical improvement or spiritual improvement. There's a story, I heard this from Shlomo Majeski, there's a story of Hasidim who were verbringing once in a cellar. The pastors of Hasidim were verbringing in a cellar. It was probably in times of communist Russia. I don't know for sure though. They were verbringing in a cellar, and there was a chassid looking for the verbringing. Maybe it wasn't, because he heard the verbringing from outside. He heard the verbringen, and he asked Hasidim, "Where are you?" He couldn't find them. They weren't in the house. They were in the cellar. So they say, "Come down here. We're in the cellar." So he tries to get into the cellar, and it's very dark. So he calls out. They say, "I can't see. It's very dark. Where am I supposed to go?" So the Hasidim answered him, "Don't worry. You'll get used to it, and then you'll be able to see." And whoever it was that was verbringen there saw this as a very important lesson to be taught. That when you're in darkness for a long time, you get used to it, you get acclimated to it, you get desensitized to it, and it becomes normal, and then you don't know that you're in darkness. And that's the role that pain plays, that you should never become desensitized. You should never say, this is okay. And Lechur, I believe that that's what the Rebbe is addressing here. I need something. You tell me that I'm not allowed to experience pain because it's going to break me like a toothpick, because this generation is an impossible generation. And if when the Rebbe said it, we weren't sure exactly what that meant, you see the way things have developed. Yeah, what are all the terms? You have snowflakes, and people need safe spaces, and people are triggered, and the amount of therapy that people need, v'chulu, v'chulu. Whether therapy helps or not is a different discussion, but the amount that people feel that they need help, they're just not managing. They're just not managing. Our grandparents, my grandmother walked tens of miles running away from the soldiers, lost all her suitcases, lost everything, didn't have anything to eat, and somehow she managed to keep it together. Over here we have everything. We can't keep it. It's a generational thing. We can have a long discussion about perhaps what's the meaning of it. About Kolpanim. So we see it clearly what they were saying. We need no proof. We understand this clearly. We are not allowed to be bitter. But if we're not allowed to be bitter, the Alter Rebbe says in the beginning of Tanya, if a person just doesn't allow himself to acknowledge that something is wrong and therefore he needs to be bitter, it could lead him to just disregarding anything that's not good. He could start, becoming desensitized to the darkness, ignore the pain, and then never heal himself. So we need another plan. We need another, game plan over here, a plan of action of what to do. So says the Rebbe, this is what we should do. It's known what the Rabbeim said. we'll skip the parentheses for now. Tracht gut wird sein gut. The Tzemach Tzedek told the Chassid, tracht gut wird sein gut. Think good and it will be good. And people hear this now, they say, oh, it's a very modern thing now. In other words, modern psychology discovered this, that your thoughts will influence the way your levels of energy, the way you feel about things, and your whole attitude towards things, and therefore things will work out much better just because you changed your mindset. Be in a positive and energetic mindset, and everything will work out. But that's not at all, and it's good that secular understanding, secular wisdom reached this conclusion, but they didn't get yet to the depth of what the Tzemach Tzedek said.
But that's what it is.
It's much more. Right? No, that's a different concept. That's a different concept. But here's what the Rebbe says: the thought along positive lines, the mere thought brings with it the good. In other words, it has the power to affect the course of reality. Thinking good will change the course of reality. It brings down a positive. We're mamshich. Whatever we do with ourselves is mamshich milamayla. Things that are commensurate to this. Rebbe famously speaks about this when it comes to bitachon. So if our behavior is in a good, positive, and optimistic light, that's what our thought process is. That itself will actually bring the good. It's not because I was in a good mindset, so I was able to make the right moves. It actually brings good with it. And we'll soon see even more than that. Therefore, it's not necessary to have miras. You don't need the pain. You don't need the bitterness. The bitterness was necessary before we knew about this Aved of Tracht gut wird sein gut. Then, in order to make sure that we fix the problem, that we heal whatever is wrong, we had to experience bitterness. But now the Rebbe says he's giving us a new way. Tracht gut wird sein gut. Thinking positively that no matter I may have stumbled, I may know how distant I am from where I need to be as a chassid, as a yid, in my service of the Eibishter. I know how many challenges I have. I know what I did yesterday. I know what I did today. I know what I did a minute ago. Nevertheless, I will have an undying tracht gut wird sein gut. I will forever believe that I'm a yid. It's going to be good. I'll come close to the Eibishter. I'll fix my ways. I'll improve myself. It's going to be good. And giving tzedakah, which people would give to bring about tshuva. Why? The mere positive and optimistic thought will bring with it the good, and the person will fix whatever it is that his problem is in serving Hashem. And here the Rebbe takes it a few levels up. And we keep in first of all, the Tzemach Tzedek promised this. I believe the Tzemach Tzedek promised this to a chassid whose son was in dire straits health-wise. It was for sure a matter of health. I believe it was a chassid who came to Tzemach Tzedek about his son, and there was no hope for him. And the Tzemach Tzedek told him, Tacht gut wird sein gut, and that's what happened. He had a recovery. So it was a promise. The Tzemach Tzedek promised him. He assured him. He guaranteed him, Tacht gut wird sein gut. It's clear, it's an absolute certainty that that's what's going to be. It's
equal to Gamzela Tova. Right? I mean,
the connection between Tracht gut wird sein gut and Gamzela Tova. I can't say, it's a little complicated. How both of these approaches in life connect to each other. Tracht gut wird sein gut and Gamzela Tova.
Isn't it the same in a way?
It kind of seems like Gamzul Teva is a different thing. Saying Tracht gut wird sein gut, that the machshava actually is like Meiser. It actually does good. Gamzul Teva, it's also Gamzul Teva is a different thing. It's not.
Because in other words, it goes along with that, the thought that it's the Hashem is cleaning you because
no, that's not Gamzul Teva.
Asher Gever Asher
Yiftach Hashem
Yasenu.
Yeah, Senuka. Yeah. And we just had in Hallel now.
So,
We just finished saying Hallel for 8 days. If we were paying attention, we would say that David Melech is singing to the Eivishter. He's saying, Yaser Yisrani Kavel Amavis Leinasanani. He's thanking the Eivishter. You tortured me, but you didn't kill me. And then what does he say in the end of the capital? Oitcha Hashem ki anisani. I'll thank you, Hashem, that you tortured me. But I don't think that that's the meaning of this Maimon. So there's such a concept, like you're saying. There's such a concept. But Gamzul Lateva is actually, I think, beyond that. In other words, it's not the idea that through, well, Dev actually mentions this concept. You saw it in Memarkin. But Gamzul Lateva is this famous story of Nachum Ish Gamzul. We used to say Gamzul Lateva is Nachum Ish Gamzul. Skipping the whole story, but when he brought the sand to the emperor, to the Roman emperor, so the sand, Leona became, he told him to try to use it against his enemies. He threw the sand at his enemies. Right? Am I skipping too much of the story, or should I backtrack a little bit? Nachum Ish Gamzul was sent. He was sent. Oh, so just the main points. He was sent by the Yidden with a box, with a chest full of diamonds and gold to give to the Roman emperor in order to remove a decree.
It was stolen.
And it was stolen, and it was switched over with sand, so he shouldn't notice. The weight should be the same. So they filled it up with sand. Nachum Ish Gamzul always said, Gamzul Lateva, whatever happens. So he continued with that box anyways. And then when the Roman emperor threw the sand against his enemies at the suggestion of Elion, who appeared as a minister, the sand turned into arrows, and he was able to win the war that he was in. And getting such a gift from the Yidden, he let go of the decree. He was mevatel, he nullified it. So the story of Gamzul Lateva makes is that whatever happens is actually good. Had he come with the gold and silver and diamonds, maybe it's the Roman emperor, he had enough gold and silver and diamonds on his own. Not necessarily would Nachum Ish Gamzul be successful. But because it was switched out to sand, that itself is what ensured his success. Because miraculous sand that turns into arrows and wins you wars, that the Roman emperor didn't have. So that's Gamzul Lateva. I don't know. Honestly, I can't think it through over here on the spot. So we'll just continue the connection where they all fit in. I would say there is a connection, but they're definitely different concepts, and the role that each one plays is something that should be thought about and tackle.
Yeah, because something else is attached that everybody knows is past, and this this advises a lot about contemplation of the past, and so this is how you
Improve yourself.
Improving in how you accept the difficult times, you know.
Yeah,
So, it strengthens you to understand that, so you now getting of all the very hard challenges that come through your way, when you have the right contemplation of the past and you're realistic, you see that the logic of that you've been, it cleans because it makes you cry occasionally to your heart, and all these all together, you
Right, so-
believe that Hashem is all for the best.
Right. So here's a distinction. Okay, the idea that you just expressed, the idea of Gamzul Lateva, we're talking about first of all an event that happened, and if the person should if the event, how he should perceive what already happened, whether it was good or bad. Okay, and it's talking about how the person should deal with it, should be able to handle it. What the Rebbe over here is saying, Tracht gut wird sein gut. The Rebbe is saying over that we should have this approach and this attitude of Tracht gut wird sein gut as an answer to not feeling bitterness in the first place. That instead of feeling bitterness, the Rebbe is talking about a different scenario. The Rebbe is talking about a scenario where a person knows that he messed up, he did something not okay, and his natural instinct and what we've done historically throughout all generations is experience bitterness over it. So they were saying instead, don't do that. So they share an idea of a focus on positivity, but it's for different scenarios, it's for different situations. Is that okay? Okay. So the Rebbe says, since it's brought on this, the story of the Tzemach Tzedek, that it actually was like this, that's actually what happened. The problem went away. I believe it was a child who was healed from the father's good attitude about it, his tracht gut. And that's what happened. It's a Meiser Rav now. In other words, it goes into a whole other category. What a tzaddik says, or what it says in Torah, is one level. However, if you see that this was what our teachers did in actuality, so it goes into a whole new category in halacha. It has a much greater strength in halacha. If there's ever a doubt about something, and you see one place where it's written something, and one place where you see what Meiser Rav, what the Talmidei Chachamim actually did, So you always go with what they actually did. What they actually did is a stronger category of halacha. So too in general, when you have a Meiser Rav, that this Tachtgut wird sein gut was actually a story that happened. It's not only a promise of the Rabbeim. It's not only something that the Tzemach Tzedek said, but it's actually a story that happened. So its power is much greater. Ubifrat, and here listen to this point. The Tzemach Tzedek was talking about the body physically being healed. Certainly, if it could change, if Tachtgut wird sein gut, if positive thinking can change a physical situation, certainly it can change and heal a spiritual not good, a spiritual unhealth. And now there adds one more point. Since we have two added points. First of all, the Frierdiker Rebbe publicized the story. And second, not only that he publicized, in other words, that he spoke about it, but he had it printed, which something that's printed is something that remains for generations to come. We now can't hear the Frierdiker Rebbe speaking Tachtgut wird sein gut, but he had it printed and we could read it where he printed it. We understand from this that this is a lesson to every single Yid that we could use this idea, this approach of Tachtgut wird sein gut to improve and heal the ailments of our body and to this moment the ailments of our soul. So instead of meriris, the Rebbe says, which like we mentioned earlier, meriris is critical, it's crucial for the process of healing. Otherwise, you don't know you need to be healed. So instead of meriris, says the Rebbe, Trachtgut wird sein gut. Anytime you encounter and become aware of a situation, of something that needs to be improved, take the attitude, the approach, Trachtgut wird sein gut. I'm a Yid, the Eibishter loves me. Certainly, I'll get closer to him and I'll fix it. It will be better without any bitterness. When we call them, moving from all of the above, we understand serving the Eibishter must be in a joyous manner. And now the Rebbe adds to it. The Neisif Lamavur Beger such over the Fidik, the Alter Rebbe already explains in the such over the Mashakos of Achatasi Negdi Sami David the Melech says that my sins are constantly before me. They're constantly before me. So from this you would think that a Yid has to focus on his Averis and end up in a bitter situation. So the Alter Rebbe explains that that's not the meaning of the pasuk. The meaning of the pasuk is not that a person should constantly be depressed and feel lowly with himself. Elonegdi daika. The Alter Rebbe's medai. What's that? Negdi daika. David HaMelech says in the pasuk, "Chatasi, my sin is negdi." He doesn't say chatasi imi, chatasi liyadi. He doesn't say that. It says negdi. Negdi taka means it's near me. However, near, is it close or is it far? Is it at a distance? Hainu mirachik, from a distance. Taksiv basrei. David HaMelech himself, in the very same kapitel, Tehillim continues, Tashmein Yisasin V'Simcha. He's asking the Eibishter to bring him to a joyous state. He wants happiness. Shetekef Achrei Rega Katan Demiris, the Alter Rebbe explains, immediately after a small moment, a short moment of bitterness, Leiv Nishbar V'Nitke, a broken and crushed heart, Tzarech li is Shleimus Asasin V'Hasimcha. A person immediately has to flip back to an ultimate and complete state of rejoicing and happiness. To the degree that David HaMelech is asking David that he should do it for him. So David says, this the Alter Rebbe already said, that whatever place Meriris has in serving the Eibishter, it's a short-lived matter. This was already like this for hundreds of years, in the times of the Alter Rebbe. But the Rebbe is now adding beyond that point, that now we're not even allowed to experience that. Even a short amount of Meriris is going to break us in our generation. We have to stay away from that. And instead, take the approach of happiness and joy, Trachtgut wird sein gut, and now the Rebbe begins to expand on this. In the same Igeres HaTshuva, where the Rebbe discusses, where the Alter Rebbe discusses tshuva, and doing tshuva through meriris for a moment. The Alter Rebbe also says, however, tshuva, while feeling bitterness, is a lower level of tshuva. And the tshuva that one does out of joy, that's actually a higher level of tshuva. So if you're saying, how could I get rid of my bitterness? I have to do tshuva. So the Rebbe says, look what the Alter Rebbe himself says. If you're going to do tshuva through bitterness, that's a lower level of tshuva. You do tshuva through joy, That's a higher level of tshuva. Tshuva ilah is dafka with joy. Actually, in that same Fabrengen, the opinion was talking about tshuva ilah. The opinion said, what did the opinion say? That long before this Maimon, Rebbe was already talking about the idea of tshuva b'simcha. So he says that the Rebbe already spoke. I think he said it was in a Fabrengen in the Chofs, where the Rebbe said, gave a mashal on tshuva b'meriris and tshuva b'simcha. Tshuva b'meriris can be compared to a person, to a beggar who's in the marketplace and he's collecting copper coins. And what's he thinking to himself as he's collecting his copper coins? He's saying, this is not a good situation. This is not what I'm capable of. I have skills. I have to work on my ambition. Let me work on my energy. Let me figure things out. Maybe I'll go talk to our friend. Why am I busy over here collecting copper coins? That's like a tshuva out of bitterness. He's in the marketplace collecting his pennies, begging on the street. What's tshuva ilah? Tshuva with a simcha. Tshuva ilah with a simcha is when this same beggar suddenly reminds himself that actually he has a treasure hidden under his bed. He forgot. He forgot. He has $1 million sitting under his bed. That's tshuva mitach simcha. That's tshuva ilah. He gets up, he drops his coins. He's not bitter. He's suddenly happy. He's done with this. He's done with being a beggar. He realizes that he's in essence rich. And that's tshuva b'simcha. And that's tshuva ilah. In other words, what we can understand from this story is that if you do tshuva out of bitterness, you're always connected to your lower state. Tshuva out of bitterness is always saying, I am a beggar. Why are you bitter? You're bitter because you perceive yourself to be no good. So as much tshuva as you do, the tshuva always keeps you in a state of perceiving yourself as less than good. That's why you're bitter. So you do tshuva. But who's doing tshuva? A person who's less than good. So you can never, even the tshuva won't take you past it. A tshuva ilah is the person saying, what am I? I'm a wealthy man. I'm a yid. I'm a child of the Eibishter. I have a neshama. I'm happy. This is a much higher tshuva. It's a tshuva that comes from the neshama, from what's good about me, from my deepest connection to the Eibishter. That's where the tshuva comes from. And that's a much higher level of tshuva.
The faith.
The pintele yid, the truth, the core, the essence of yid is activated by this, which is not by meriris. By meriris, what's activated, what's focused is my sins, my distance, my no good. So the Rebbe says that the Alter Rebbe already mentions over there that a much better way of tshuva is tshuva ilah. In our generation, there's something else that's unique about our generation. We are now, like the Rebbe mentioned earlier, in the heels of Mashiach. We already finished, we went through, we experienced all of the troubles and pains and tortures. The Pashtus is a reference to the Holocaust. That perhaps Tisha B'Av, there was such a level of annihilation, maybe even not, I don't know. But the amount of pain that was experienced by the Jewish nation, and especially that this comes on top of Tisha B'Av, and it comes on top of the pogroms, and it comes on top of Chmieletsky and Tach V'Tat and all the other horrors, the blood libels, etc. So we went through all the Yisurim already, and the Holocaust topped it all off. The Yisurim, like you mentioned before, torture, pain, mevarenim, memarkin, they cleanse. The Yisurim mevarenim, the Yisurim mezakchim umeremimim. And Yisurim and pain and torture refine and clarify and purify and uplift a person. Anybody who's experienced pain and challenge in his life knows that this is true. The greatest growth that a person experiences is when he goes through these things. So now the Rebbe says, generationally, as a generation, we already went through, we experienced pain like never before, and therefore, so therefore, all of the Yidden are at the highest level and the most elevated level. And we are connected. We have our thing is tshuva ilah dafka. Shehi mitech simcha, which is dafka mitech simcha. So if the Alter Rebbe spoke about a place for tshuva tata, which comes from meriris, which comes from bitterness, and then he said, however, if you could reach the higher level of tshuva ilah, it's much better. In our generation, says the Rebbe, this is a massive statement if you think about it. The Rebbe says that we have the power within us because of all of the pain and torture that we went through. It purified us. And now a Yid's soul can express itself in an instant. And I think we see it. The way Yid's soul, no matter who he is, suddenly is drawn to the Eibster with a power and a force that makes no sense. And Ule Yishlema, that this is the explanation, that we're more refined. When you're right, the more refined the glass is, the more the light shines through it. Or for example, a diamond, the light shines through it in a beautiful way. The higher quality something is, the easier it is for the light to go through it. We've been elevated generationally to a higher quality. So maybe individually we stumble and we fail and we fall. Nevertheless, we have within us the capacity in a second to turn to the Eibishter. And that's the result of all of the pain and trouble that we went through. And therefore, now all of us have to take the approach and say, how am I going to do tshuva? I'm going to do tshuva through tshuva ilah. And that's performed with simcha, with joy, not with bitterness. Yesh lahesif, and that adds one more point. And this is, it's very rare to see the Rebbe say that something that the Alter Rebbe says is almost not relevant to us now. I don't want to say, and it's not a mugadik maimer, but it's the mashmos is, you can ask your own mashpia, but the simple reading, it's not spoken literally, but the simple understanding is that Rebbe is saying is that it's not so relevant to us what Alter Rebbe discusses in Tanya, which is a mind-boggling statement. And Pashas Rebbe is saying it not because he disagrees with Alter Rebbe, but because the times demand it, and the times have changed, and we're so close to Mashiach.
Not the Iker.
Huh?
Not the Iker Aveda is not the Iker.
It's not shaykh to us, is almost what the Rebbe says. Not only that, it's not the Iker. Listen what the Rebbe says. That this lower level of tshuva mitech merirus that comes with a bitterness, when did the Alter Rebbe allow for it? Once a week, lifnei yom haShabbos, v'hainu b'leil shishi. Thursday night, leil shishi is always a special time. You learn all night, you farang all night. That's a time for this momentary, short-lived bitterness that the Alter Rebbe allows. One time a week, you may experience it. So the Rebbe says, we are standing now in the 6th millennia since the creation. We're in the year 5,783. In other words, we finished from 0 to 1,000. That was the end of the first one. 5,000 was the end of the 5th one. Now we're already in the middle of the 6th millennia. Near to the end of the 6th day, not Leil Shishi. We're not Thursday night, the Leil Shishi. We're already deep into the middle day. And like Rebbe says in other places, we're past Chatzos. 5,500. Tuf Kuf Hey. Tuf Kuf was Chatzos. Now we're already Tuf Shin. 5,700. So we're already after Chatzos on Friday. We're close to the end of the 6th day, which is Karav Liyem Shabbos. Shabbos is a time of joy, not a time of meridas. Leil Shishi is when the Alter Rebbe set aside for meridas. But generationally now, we are close to the day of Shabbos. It's a simple, obvious matter to understand. The Aveda for us is an Aveda through Simcha, an Aveda of Tshuva Ilah. If the Rebbe is going through all of this trouble, when it gets to Tshuva, everybody understands that when it comes to other matters, just day-to-day life, how important tshuva is. In other words, whatever they were saying over here, even in a situation of tshuva, you have to be b'simcha. But obviously, every moment of our life, we have to be in a situation of simcha, like Rebbe explained at length over here. Okay.
Yes.